All right. Hello. Welcome to Artificially Intelligent, where a black musician and a white comedian discuss whatever the hell it is we discuss. And we have our favorite atheist with us this week.
Yeah, man. I wish we had a sound, like some kind of trumpet sound that we could make when we said that, to announce your arrival.
Well, you're the musician. You need to pull it up. That to anybody tuning in for the first time, that is Antar Goodwin is the musician. I'm the cracker comedian, and the atheist is Andrew Hall.
Let the pigeons loose.
So we're going to jump right in. And I had texted both of you or messaged and said we would talk about personal accountability tonight. And the reason I wanted to do that is I want to open, and I'm going to surprise him with this, I want to open with an apology to Barrett.
All right.
The last thing we recorded, it's anybody that's watching for the first time or even multiple times and doesn't know this, I'm the one that records it, and then I just throw our names up and edit it. And it's not like, it doesn't take any skill. I just chop off the beginning where we talk before and after. So the point is, I'm the one that watches the video. And the last time we recorded a couple of weeks back, at the end, we promote whatever we're promoting. And I mentioned my book. And Barrett and I have talked in the past about my inability to take a compliment, where I negate it with a sideways remark, and so he started giving me very high praise on my book. And as I'm watching it back, like looking for the ending and thinking, okay, what am I going to put here? His website, I'm watching it, and Barrett's saying very kind things, and I'm like this. All right, yeah, that's it. Good night. Like, I just completely negated everything. I mean, I didn't even realize it at the time, but watching it back, I'm like, wow, I just shit all over everything nice he was trying to say about me. So I will be accountable for, it looked horrible. I will be accountable for acting like an asshole, even though it was probably just my insecurities, and I apologize. It was very nice of you to praise my work, and I completely shot it down. It looked like shit when I watched it back. You probably didn't even notice. That's why I said it's a surprise to you. Like, you didn't text me after, like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, I did not notice at all, actually.
But you've known me for years, so you're used to my asshole behavior.
Yes, I water, ducks back.
But yeah, that's where I wanted to start. But the overall theme being personal accountability. I did a podcast in Colorado this past weekend where, once again, I talked about something we've talked about on this podcast numerous times. I took personal responsibility for my failings in Los Angeles. There are two ways to talk about it. One is to have a chip on your shoulder and say, oh, the clubs disrespected me and they wouldn't book me, and on and on and on. Or me saying, I didn't put in the time. I did not go hang out at the club until 2 a.m. I didn't get myself known. I thought all I had to do was stand on stage and be funny, and I would be magically discovered. It's on me. I get that. Yeah, so we could also segue that into a discussion of religion, as we have our atheist here, and how people, some, not all, people tend to pawn off their actions on, well, that's just, I'll ask for forgiveness, or that's the way God made me, or anything. We can go down any number of paths right now.
I just want, I want to say thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it. And
thanks for speaking. I've just been here sitting here fucking yammering away, like wondering where I'm going, and if someone's going to jump in and start bailing water out of this fucking sinking ship.
Save you from yourself.
Yes.
When you were saying that you were going to apologize, I was hoping it would be some kind of Ricky Schroeder kind of, that dude yelling at a guy at Costco.
Half-hearted, yeah.
Oh, completely. A horrible apology. It was as if he took his testicles out and waved them in front of this poor guy again. And saying that I'm going to give you the world's crappiest apology. And it's like, let me talk, it's really about the overlords, really. I'm not at fault. I'm not taking any blame. It's like, how to do it. I'm sorry you were in the way, and I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. But ultimately, you got to break a couple of eggs to make an omelet.
Barrett, you know what he's talking about?
No idea.
Ricky Schroeder, Silver Spoon's Ricky Schroeder, went on a tirade on a Costco employee because he didn't have a mask on. And then in his apology, he said, dear employee, I'm sorry you had to be there, but it needed to be seen. What I'm really doing is attacking the Costco gods and the CDC and anybody that's telling us to wear a mask. You just happen to be the conduit for me to get my message out. So sorry. It was like Andrew said, it was a dickish sort of non-apology.
Oh yeah. And it might be my 20 years of marriage, now I'm happily divorced, of course, as many of your listeners may
remember.
I don't know. I don't assume people know my personal story, I guess. But I was in marriage therapy in and out for like, I don't know, 12 or 15 years. It all seems like a blur. And one of the things that always got me going was like, why can't you just give me an apology, like a real apology? And so I saw that Ricky Schroeder thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, these are flashbacks I'm having right now.
PTSD. One thing I found interesting about it is reading through the article and who he is as a person. He apparently called the police so he donated money to Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old asshole that went on a shooting spree in Kenosha, and allegedly, don't want to get this sued, don't want to get sued. Yeah. And then so people blew up at Ricky Schroeder online saying, you're donating money to a murderer, you're a piece of shit, you're a has-been. He called the police and had them come look at his social media. Like, look at these people saying mean things about me on Twitter. And the police were like, yeah, these aren't death threats or anything. They're just calling you a piece of shit. So man up there, puss boy. But he called the police because people said mean things about him on Twitter.
Oh, I mean, his feelings were probably hurt.
Oh, they were.
At the end of the day, listen, they're not really yelling at him. They're yelling at the authorities. And it's really, he's just a conduit for their anger.
Yes. Well, let's talk about apologies. One thing I have learned over the course of my life, I've learned several things. And one is, I think I used to offer an apology when I wanted to be apologized to. You say, I'm sorry, so that the other person says, I'm sorry too, and then you move on with your life. And Barrett, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I do remember the moment that broke me of that. It was at your wedding, I believe. And we were just talking about the past and life and women we'd been with and broken up with. Not women like bragging like, oh, I was with this chick, but like previous relationships is what I meant to say. And one of my exes came up and I said, I haven't thought about her in a couple of years. We'll call her Karen. And so we had ended somewhat poorly. And by that, I mean, she dumped me. And I said, all right, well, if you're going to dump me, I just don't want to talk to you. Like, just let me get over it. Just walk away. And so instead of doing that, she called me repeatedly. I think I still want to break up with you, but maybe I want to get back together. Maybe we should get back together, but I think I want to be broken up. And I kept like, will you stop fucking calling me? If we're dumped, if we're over, we're over. And there was more to it than that. But at the wedding, what I did is I reached out to her and said, hey, I sent her an email. I said, things didn't end all that well. And for whatever I did, I'm sorry for my part in it. And she wrote back and said, oh, well, great. Apology accepted. And that was it. No owning up to anything she had done. None of the phone calls, none of the months of, I don't want to say stringing me along, but just ignoring my wishes to leave me alone. And I just sort of went, I think when I sent my email, I had expected I'm sorry too. And I didn't get that. And I just went, all right, I've learned something about myself. So now I generally apologize when it's just something I want to get out of my system. Hence how we started this with Barrett didn't even realize what I had done, but I did, and I wanted to own up to it.
Yeah. If I feel like I on my personal ledger, if I feel like I'm in the red with someone, if I did something wrong, then I'll apologize. And they can take the apology. They may not take the apology. I'll make a good faith effort at giving an apology. And I know that there are times that sometimes I might have to give more than one apology. As long as I think that the person isn't being taking advantage of me, I'm okay with that.
Without getting maybe too personal, I guess I don't know that I've ever wronged anyone to the point where I'd have to, I say grovel. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you don't have to get specific, but isn't an apology an apology? And moving on.
I don't grovel either, and I guess this is me talking about my marriage, about my old marriage that I think was successful since I got out of it. I just want to say that right now.
We all have different definitions.
Exactly. So my ex-wife while we were married, she goes, Andy, you apologize, but you never act like you're sorry. And it's like, well, I'm not gonna grovel to you. If that's what you're looking for, I am going to say, I'm sorry, and I am earnestly sorry. But in terms of, me groveling at your feet, Andy Hall does not do, I'm not in that business. That's not what I do.
Well, let me ask you a question. Would she apologize ever?
No.
Okay. Because the reason why I ask is because I wonder if apologies are like anything else, they're very personal, right? Like the way I apologize, like when Nathan says he apologizes to get an apology, I wonder if maybe that's not always true, but maybe sometimes we apologize the way we'd like to be apologized to. Ooh. And so when you apologize to someone, they don't interpret it as a genuine apology because it doesn't look like what they do, particularly self-centered people, right? Oh. Which would be most of us at certain times of our lives.
I like that very much.
Right, but you know what I mean? Like, you kind of see the world through your lens and what you define as an apology, not what the person apologizing to you defines as an apology.
Well, you raise a good point, and I've said this on my own show to people in somewhat of a dickish way. It's okay. So I hear that you're remorseful about whatever you did. If I'm interviewing someone, and then I'll ask them, well, how are you going to make that right, or how are you making that right? Yeah. So you can apologize, of course, but you want to make it right too. So when I do an apology, I try to say, well, this is what I did wrong, and this is what I'm going to do to rectify the problem in the future. This is how I'm going to try to deal with it in the future. And it isn't just the apology; it's the act of contrition too. In a lot of ways, it's about trying to make things right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah, and that's what you don't see with a lot of public figures who get caught. Right. I'm not going to talk about Joe Rogan, but let's talk about Joe Rogan for a minute.
I miss Joe Rogan. I haven't listened to him since he went to Spotify. When I had him on Apple Podcasts, sure, I'd dial him up if he had an interesting guest. I loved listening to him, but I can't say I followed him to Spotify just because it became so difficult that I'd have to download another app, and that was too much trouble for me, apparently. Yeah. First world problems.
I have not heard a podcast of his since he moved over to Spotify, but you can't look at the news cycle now without hearing.
True. I mean, what did he do? What did he do?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, he was, I don't know if you guys heard about this.
He said vaccinations are stupid for young people.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but
yeah, basically. And that wasn't okay. So that could have been, that was obviously incorrect, factually incorrect. And then, if you want to be a moral person, that's factually incorrect, right? Mm-hmm. But put a pin on that for a second. And then his excuse, not apology, an excuse is that, no one should listen to me anyway, because I'm just a guy who's drunk on a show that reaches like 200 million people or so. And I'm going, and so basically what his excuse was the same excuse that Alex Jones uses, the same excuse that Tucker Carlson uses, was that while having a huge platform or having a platform, they use it irresponsibly. And even though they act like an authority, whenever they do something wrong, they want an out. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And it's like, that's not responsibility.
Yeah, to go sideways. Tucker Carlson, I don't have the facts in front of me. I just have the knowledge. He actually, Fox News won in court. Someone sued, and I don't know what the lawsuit was for, but the argument Fox made was, don't take Tucker Carlson seriously. He's a blowhard. And the judge bought it and said, yeah, well, I'm going to dismiss the case because this idiot listened to Tucker Carlson and therefore cannot sue. And I'm like, that's goddamn genius. And
That's
then he goes back on the air and says more stupid shit.
But isn't that the McDonald's defense? When the woman sued because her daughter had put on a lot of weight from eating McDonald's and the lawyers were losing. And then the way they won the case was, well, you do know that McDonald's is called junk food, right? And that's basically how they won the case. Like, well, it's junk food. Like, you clearly couldn't have thought it was diet food for your daughter. So, you know what I mean? And it's like, I mean, here's the thing, though. With a guy like Joe Rogan, I feel like he really just sits on his show and smokes weed and talks shit with his buddies. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm not actually going to take vaccination advice from him. I might take it from one of his guests, potentially, but I wouldn't actually take, regardless of his reach. It's kind of like if Kim Kardashian said something, I'm like, well, right, she's got a massive reach, but at the end of the day, isn't that like social Darwinism, kind of like in a weird application?
It is, and I
mean?
I agree with you. The problem I have is there are a lot of stupid fucking people on this planet. I mean, you're like, you, but your average dipshit. All right, well, Kim Kardashian said it.
I'm not trying to take the side of the fucking
no, I'm not,
because the conservatives with all their like whatever stuff, right? We want to censor everything that hip hop does, but we want to say no censorship. It's like, all right, guys, like, what is that, right? So, but to a degree, I feel like Tucker Carlson comes off as it's news. He's on Fox News, right? And Joe Rogan is a fight announcer, comic, who, I mean, I'm not trying to, like...
No, I agree with you, but I also agree that people are stupid.
At a certain standpoint, when do we have to become responsible for our own actions?
Yep.
Right? Like, at a certain standpoint, when is it if we're talking about accountability, if I listen to Joe Rogan and then I die because Joe Rogan told me that all I needed to eat was steak and cheese and not eat bread. Not that he said that, but let's say he's told me that all I needed was steak and cheese to survive, and I listened to him. Is that actually his fault?
Well, you know, he does present himself as an authority. That's the thing. He has academics on, he has very popular people on. And so he does come off as someone, if you want to know alt facts or the hidden side of things. He's like Freakonomics for idiots. You know.
Well, and I want to go back to something Barrett said about the difference between Tucker and Joe is it's funny. The Daily Show years ago, when Jon Stewart was still hosting, broke down the Fox News bullshit cycle where they have the news division and the opinion division. And what happens is Tucker Carlson says something and then the news picks it up and says, oh, people are saying this, and reports it as news. And then Tucker says, hey, did you see what was on Fox News? And then it just becomes this cycle of bullshit. So yeah, Tucker, they're very shrewd with what they do over there. They know exactly what they're getting away with.
And I guess I haven't beefed out enough about Joe Rogan. It's when I'm on my small platform, when I say like fact, reality-based things, make fact statements, I can back them up. There are references, in the back of my head that I can call upon, or I can Google them at the very least. And so if I'm going to say something controversial, I think I should be able to have something I can reference. Joe Rogan does not care. He is capable of doing that, but he does not care. And that's at the very least a lack of compassion for his fans and for people who do take him seriously.
Well, I'll say this. Well, those are facts, but then there's alternative facts, right?
And you can Google anything and get the answer you want these days.
Yeah, but there's trusted sources, right? There's the scientific consensus.
What I will say, though, Joe Rogan will look up things when he disagrees with what you say.
Yes.
Yeah, he blasted Candace Owen somewhat recently. The clip went viral when she was saying climate change was a hoax, and he just kept pushing back at her. So,
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting debate, right? Like, because athletes say this all the time, right? Like, they're athletes, and I mean, like that's been a big thing, right? Like, athletes going out and making a lot of money and being role models and then being shitty people.
Yeah.
And people like, you're a role model. And they're like, no, I'm a football player.
Right? Wasn't Charles Barkley the first one to say it and be?
Yeah.
Wasn't that his quote?
I mean, maybe.
I seem to attribute it to him. But let's stick with personal responsibility. So we have two sides to this coin. We have on Andrew's side, and I see both sides of it. Andrew saying that Joe Rogan should be personally responsible for his audience. He has a big platform. And Barrett saying that, hey, these dumb fucks maybe should read a book instead of just listening to one person. And I absolutely agree with that. So where does personal responsibility?
Well, this is the, I mean, it's a much larger example of it, but this is the Facebook argument. Does Facebook have a responsibility for being able to be manipulated into being a tool that gets people to believe dumb shit, right? Do they have a responsibility, or do people have a responsibility to not be idiots, right? And
well, we do have bad brains. We have. It's not
one of my favorite groups, by the way, bad brains. But continue.
Skeptic Michael Shermer came up with that term. I believe we have bad brains. Evolution doesn't do perfect; it does good enough. So our brains developed, on the savannah, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years ago. And so it's very difficult for us to think statistically about things. And I was going somewhere on that.
Well, I can jump in for a second.
Yeah.
My pushback to Barrett is always, this is, if anyone's ever watched this vodcast, they should probably know where I'm going. My dipshit high school friends who have absolutely zero interest in reality or facts or the world around them. So they just, sit in their homes and go, I'm voting Trump because America. And that's where it ends for them. Or if they do have thoughts, they're so skewed to boxing out facts for what they want to believe that, I've got one that believes in chemtrails and that vaccinations cause autism, and another that has voted Republican his whole life. And you say, didn't Reagan and Bush Sr. lead to the recession, which helped Clinton win with Ross Perot, who then had the booming 90s, and then Bush came in and just collapsed the economy, and then you said Trump is the lesser of two evils and he botched the pandemic, and now you just can't wait to get Biden out of office. These are people that pay no attention to the world around them other than what they want or what they think they want. So as far as Facebook having a responsibility, I don't know. I'm torn. On the one hand, I don't believe in a nanny state. On the other hand, I know incredibly stupid people.
There is an algorithm to Facebook. And if you're a content creator and utilize Facebook, then you know this. So if you put on puppy dogs and rainbows, then Facebook wants to promote your content. But if you do something controversial, it will send your content to people who are, for lack of better wording, more likely to be radicalized by what you're saying. So if you're a center-right person, or if the algorithm picks you out to be a center-right person, they will promote more center-right, further right content to you.
As does YouTube.
As does YouTube. So Facebook and YouTube both they aren't just neutral actors. They have algorithms pumping people full of information, and a lot of times misinformation.
Misinformation is where I was going to jump in. Yes.
Yeah. And so I think they bear some responsibility. And also, once again, knowing now Joe Rogan, and I want to pop back to Joe Rogan for a second. Joe Rogan's not a stupid guy, right? I think he's been dealing with testosterone poisoned people for a long time, and he's gotten a lot of money in his pocket. So maybe he thinks he doesn't have to be a good skeptic or a humanist. But, when you know that your audience covers a wide span of people, and if you are promoting yourself as someone who gives out information and tries to do clear-headed thinking, right? Then if that's your brand, then you should be trying to. And I do shows drunk. I do shows like on my channel. But I'll tell you this, gentlemen, and people in the audience, is that even when I'm fucking blazing drunk, I still don't say the crazy stuff that comes out of Joe Rogan's mouth.
Well, I mean, as I said, I used to listen to him, and in his defense, one, I found him entertaining sometimes, but he has a wide swath of guests on, not just one point of view. He will have anybody on and talk to him. In fact, for a while, he was talking about trying to get AOC on, but she wouldn't go on his show because he said mean things about transgender people. Like, she's the one with the like. She maybe has a responsibility to go on and set him straight because he's asking for it. He will have anybody on, and he does ask a lot of questions, and he listens.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the one thing I liked about him is. I'm not going to shit on any other podcast, but there are interview podcasts where the host would ask a question and then talk for the next 10 minutes, and then the guest wouldn't say anything. Rogan may say stupid shit, but he also asks a lot of questions and has a wide swath of people on to give their point of view about anything.
Are you referencing the time that you came on my show to talk about your wonderful book, We Are 100? See what I did there?
You let me talk too much on your show.
That was a cheap plug, everyone, for Nathan's book.
And awkward silence. Okay.
I am of the belief that, see, it's weird because I feel like there is a line, but the line, it's not that people are moving the goalposts, but the line shifts because, God, I'm going to sound like such a fucking conservative here. I hate this stuff. Like, because it's like, like when you start talking about, like when you talk about race and gender and intersectionality, right? Now, intersectionality is something that, in the Black community, Black women have been aware of this intersectionality thing for a pretty long time, right? As have any group of people who have more than one thing that they have to check. You know what I mean? When they go down the list, right? But to a degree, when you listen to guys like Jordan Peterson and people like that, they'll talk about, well, right, but if you're a good-looking, intelligent Black person born into a middle-class family, do you have a better shot than an unattractive, unintelligent white person born into a poor family, right? Like, does that level out? And there's all these questions, right? And it's like, I mean, yeah, there's a line at which someone can go far enough across the line that, there's a balance there, right? So I don't want to sound like them when I say this because it is dangerously close to that. But
yeah, I feel what you're saying. I think that there is a qualitative difference between someone who is making a good faith effort and is just wrong, like Joe Rogan.
Okay.
And then you have somewhere towards shyster and con artist. You might have Jordan Peterson. He's not fully he's not, so if Joe Rogan's making an honest effort, you have Jordan Peterson going towards shyster and con man, and then you have
that's awesome.
Rubin, Dave Rubin
and a secret. Barrett and I both kind of like Peterson.
Well, I mean, I'm curious what it is you don't like about him.
Everything. Okay, so I took a class with Peterson back in the 90s. I don't know if I've talked about this.
No.
I took a night course over at Harvard, and the man is brilliant. I'll say this. This is like 30 years ago. Brilliant guy, but he basically thinks, and I'm going to characterize him here, that if you haven't read enough Dostoevsky, you're going to be a communist.
Is that 2021 Jordan Peterson?
It is the same Peterson.
Okay.
Because what's interesting about him is that he has basically refined his ideas from back then. And if anything, he has gotten deeper into them because I think we all know people from like back in the day who are just more of who they are now in their 50s, in their 60s. And that's Peterson now. But mind you, he has a lot of secondary traits that are that are really cool, that are virtuous. He always took care of people, of students, He always took time out to talk to individuals. He's a magnetic guy. He's a great speaker. But, he traffics in these tropes against atheists.
So that's where this is coming from. It's getting personal.
It is personal.
Whenever I've heard him speak, I've never really heard him talk about religion. And I know it's a big part of what he does. And I always found it interesting that I would hear him speak about, I can't even think of anything. And I go, all right, that makes sense. Like, I'm not a Peterson devotee, but whenever I hear him, I go, yeah, okay, I agree with that, and then move on with my life. And that's the thing with Rogan too, is I always like listening to him speak. Maybe it's because I'm such a strong-willed, thick-headed bastard that I can listen to almost anything and just go, oh, okay, I agree with that. No, I disagree with that. And it really has to reach Alex Jones level of, or Tucker Carlson levels of, okay, fuck you. Now you're just spewing lies, and you're spewing lies.
Exactly. And that's the continuum, right? You can say that someone's making a good faith effort, and I like for an example, I'm sure that with enough discussion, and I have, because Rogan was over here in Boston for a while, and I don't know if I told you this story about Rogan. I heard this from a comedian, Maron, who's over in New York now. But he got into a confrontation with Rogan one night, once again back in the day, and Rogan was, using the F word, the slur for gay people. And Maron, who's a big guy, he, confronted Rogan over it, and it got hot. But Rogan eventually apologized, and then they hugged it out afterwards. So I think Rogan is someone who earnestly is trying to do well, as against to, once again, like a Dave Rubin or a Ben Shapiro who knows what they're doing.
I will say this for Rogan. Whenever I've heard him say something like Antifa starting fires in the forests of Oregon, the next day he's like, you know what? That was misinformation. That was kind of stupid of me. The same with the vaccinations. Right after the vaccinations, he came and said, all right, don't listen to me.
Here's the important thing, too, is when you look at the data, right, when you look at how people think, if you shoot out an idea like this, like a false piece of information, people will remember that
more than it's the retraction on page 18 of the paper, right?
Right. They're not going to remember the retraction. They'll just remember, and they won't even remember maybe where they heard it from. They'll just think about Antifa lighting fires, and they go, yeah, I heard that. So that's why it's so important to be responsible with the words that we use when we're on our platforms.
I can agree with that. But I also know that I fail a lot and say a lot of dumb shit and look back over my life and go, wow, I could take that back, or maybe not have said that.
But I mean, I guess, if we're going to say that words have value, right? Words are like currency to a degree, right? Like they have value, and they have the value we have ascribed to them, essentially, much like currency, right?
Yeah.
I suppose maybe in the same way we have a responsibility with our money to not buy things that pollute the ecosystem, right? Don't we have a responsibility with our words to not pollute the information ecosystem, right? Like why do we not take, it's, a silly analogy here, but why do we not take recycling good ideas and discarding bad ones as seriously as we take recycling reusable products? Why don't we recycle reusable information, right? Like why don't we treat that with the same, why don't we treat the information ecosystem with the same care we treat the environmental ecosystem, you know what I mean, with the same kind of sense of we need to protect this by being vigilant about not throwing away, by putting our fucking plastic things in here versus in here. Why are we not equally as vigilant with the information ecosystem?
And that's a great question. I think part of it is that our education system doesn't really gear our students for critical thinking that well. I don't think my kid has ever heard anything about logical fallacies, for example. And she's a sophomore in Braintree. She has heard them at home. But in terms of really being able to deconstruct arguments and learning about how we have a tendency to think incorrectly in all these different ways. I don't think she's heard that at school.
Well, and isn't it? And well, two thoughts. One, Sting already covered this with his song "History Will Teach Us Nothing," but with regard to your daughter and what she has and had not heard, and our school system, I hate to be, old man, get off my lawn here, but is it not getting worse? Because everything I've read about the past 5 years of higher so-called education is that now students don't like being challenged. And this runs the gamut from professors challenging a way of thinking or even giving a bad grade, all the way to university students getting pissed off because a speaker they don't like, someone as stupid and useless as Milo Yiannopoulos, whatever you say his fucking name, but any speaker they don't like, they'll protest and look. Whereas my thought is, Ben Shapiro is going to come speak at a university. I'm not going to go see him. Like, that's where it ends for me. I'm not going to go see him. He's a fucking short little. I can't believe a guy with such an annoying voice has a podcast. It makes no sense to me why anybody listens to him. But they protest anything they don't like. So it's getting harder to teach critical thinking because they throw up walls themselves.
Well, the best thing they could do, and that's the education, the teachers and the education establishment here in the States, is that to start it when people are so young that by the time they get to college, then they already have the toolkit and the passion to know what the truth is. If you get kids like as a freshman year in college, then it is too late. It's too late. It's unless you have like the 5% or 1% of the philosophy students, right? It is too late by then to really to create a mass group of students or a generation of people who are passionate about knowing what the truth is, and that's what we've done. We just waited.
But do you feel like there's a difference in class that attributes to this? Because like when we talk about you'll hear middle class and under without trying to sound hierarchical, right? We'll say things like a liberal arts education, English lit, things like that are horrible ideas. But wealthy people continually send their children to schools to learn how to think by reading the works of great thinkers. Because if you can think well, you can do whatever the fuck you want. You know what I mean? Like having a good brain is like having strong arms. It doesn't mean you can just lift and set down heavy objects. It means you can lift and set down heavy anything. Right. And if your brain works well, it works well. That's what it does. It computes problems. The problems don't have to be specific. You know what I mean? You just have a good brain,
And if I could play off that for 1 second, Andrew, because I want to go back. I liked everything Bear just said. I want to go back to what you said too, but you said about the search for truth. I think that goes hand in hand with what I'm complaining about. Kids not liking critical thinking, because we live in an era right now of my truth. I'm speaking my truth. This is my truth. It's the ego driven. This is what I believe. So it must be right, because going back to what we said earlier, I can find things by Googling to support my bullshit beliefs. So I don't think anybody knows what the truth is anymore. So you have this idea of truth with this, which is abstract, because now everybody carries around their own personal version of truth, and it's muddying the waters and scary.
If we were going to divide up, personal truth as being lived experience, right? And then fact-based information as the truth, there would probably be a way to help clean things up in terms of how we speak about it, right? I mean, my lived experience shows this. My lived experience shows that. That's my personal truth. It's a clunky way of saying that, but it's powerful and people glom onto that. But when you talk about fact-based statements, well, that's different. That's a different thing.
It should be different. I'm just not sure it is anymore. And I think that's problematic and in many ways sad.
Right. People may feel like it's separate, but it's still
right. Well, that goes to something Barrett said several times tonight, and it's I hear it a lot in everyday is well, what I feel is, as opposed to I think. We are in tune with what we feel a situation to be, as opposed to thinking something through. And I'm not trying to shit on you, Barrett. I think we've talked about this off the air once, where I said we should talk about it on air. The knee jerk, because you can't challenge someone's feeling. If someone says, I feel, yeah, you can feel like you're in the mood for ice cream, but you can't feel that water is fire. But we use feel because that way no one can challenge us. Because if you say, I think, aha, I can challenge your thoughts. Go ahead. You're chomping at the bit there, Andrew.
I am, because what you can say, and this is what I do, is that what do you mean by that? So what you do when you ask a person question is that a question like that, it shifts their locus of thinking from an emotional part of their brain to the thinky part of their brains up here in their frontal lobe. And so
what do you mean by that?
So in other words, when they're saying, I'm feeling.
I just fucking did it to you, you dumbass. I was making a joke.
I'm sorry. I'm so much in the zone on this thing.
I was literally doing you to you as an asshole, and I thought you'd catch it. Sorry, keep going. I just thought it'd be funny to jump right in there with a.
No, you got me.
Yeah.
You should apologize.
But continue. I'm not apologizing for that. Fuck that. I'm owning that.
But yeah, just questioning people, man. It could just activate different thinking parts of their brain, and then that could make them think about their feelings.
I mean, yeah, I think one of the things I've started to realize with myself and with other people is that you can't actually trust your feelings. Because while your feelings may be remarkably accurate feelings, they may be based on a misinterpretation of something. Mm-hmm. And so you can't trust them. And when people say I have a gut feeling, it's like, well, okay. Past the age of 16, how many times did your gut feeling end up with you getting in trouble, doing something stupid, up until arguably yesterday? Or earlier today, when you had a feeling you should do something? You know what I mean? Like, if I'm actually being honest, my feelings don't always have the right fucking answer. Do you know what I mean? Like, they feel a certain way. Like, when, like, you know, to use a common trope here, like when I feel like calling my ex-girlfriend at 3 a.m, you know what I mean? Like, that's a feeling, right? Like,
I called your ex-girlfriend just the other day at 3 a.m.
Exactly.
You know what you're reminding me of? You're reminding me of Stephen Colbert's famous speech at the Presidential Correspondents' Dinner, the press corps, where he was making fun of George Bush to his face, Jr., where I can't get the line exactly right, but he said, you know, George and I are a lot alike. You know, we don't trust Bookler and we listen to our gut. You know, we think we feel the same way on Wednesday as we did on Monday. Doesn't matter what happened on Tuesday. And I thought that was such a great line because, yeah.
And you know, that's the issue. And I'm going to bring it back to atheism for a second, or at least with faith, with religion, is that if you believe in things carved in stone, and a whole bunch of things carved in stone, it can be difficult to change your opinion about things when you're so deeply holding big T truth in terms of whether it's abortion or the Second Commandment or the Amendment or whatever ones. That's the guns, right?
I mean,
change your opinion.
But at the end of the day, we walk around like these things are like these false binaries, you know what I mean? Abortion, not abortion, guns, no guns, right? But in reality, they're so nuanced, right? Like race, sex, gender, like the difference between sex and gender is arguably nuanced to the average person. To somebody else, sex and gender are like clearly these two different things, right? But to the average person, they're the same exact thing. It's kind of like prejudice and racism. It's kind of the same thing when it's prejudice from one person with one race against another person from another race. That's what we call racism. But maybe racism and prejudice are two different things, right? Maybe gender and sex are two different things. And there is a place where these nuances matter. And this, again, it comes down to critical thinking. I think that we're just lazy thinkers.
And
like most of what I see is lazy thinking. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that is exactly why everything you are saying right now, and I hate to talk politics, and I apologize to both of you, but everything you are saying is why it's so easy to just go, "Make America great again." Fuck it, I'm voting for that. I mean, it's a slogan.
I mean,
it harkens back to a simpler time that, even though the simpler time was still filled with problems, it's easier just to imagine there weren't none of that bullshit you're talking about with the genders and the sexes and the races. You know, like it just harkens back to simplicity, and that's why people vote for slogans.
But I mean, maybe like this is to tie it back into our buddy Joe Rogan here. I guess the question is this: are we trying to legislate the Joe Rogans of the world in order to combat stupidity? When the reality would be, it might be easier, like we can blame the Joe Rogans and the Tucker Carlsons and all these people. We can say, listen, we're gonna put an end to you guys talking shit and saying dumb shit and whatever, right? But are we really just? Can we ultimately protect people from themselves by putting bumpers on everything? Right, like, because when we, you know what I mean, if we're talking about like the fragility of people, right? Like we talk about the fragility of millennials and people like that, people who grew up with AstroTurf as their playground versus people who grew up with swing sets in bolted into the concrete that you try to do backflips off of with your buddies and spinning things that would throw you.
One of my most popular bits.
Right, exactly. Right, like.
Well, and I think Joe Rogan is searching for the truth. As I said, he always asks questions, and if I obviously favor him more than Andrew does, because I was about to say if an errant comment leaves his mouth, and maybe there are thousands of errant comments, but you know, I don't know that the answer is trying to protect people from everything.
Well, you know, for some, I mean, if we're going to put warning labels on cigarettes,
right,
all right. And if people are, and if certain news, quote unquote, news organizations, if their legal defense is that, hey, you shouldn't be listening to this guy on our channel.
I like where you're going. I like this
he
very much.
doesn't do news. Then, you know, maybe you should just tell everyone all the time when Tucker Carlson's on or Sean Hannity's on, there should just be like a skull and crossbones with this is not news.
Warning
Surgeon General says.
Ticker across the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Don't take them seriously.
I like that very much because, like you said, it was argued in court. This is not, I don't like Tucker because we disagree on shit. No, he's a fucking blowhard whose own boss said, don't listen to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of like when the cigarette people, you know, those ads that they put up on the side of the turnpikes, and parkways, and highways, and byways, and shit, right?
That said, don't smoke, that made kids smoke.
Right. They basically, when all my smoker friends would see them, and it would trigger a thought in them, like, oh, right, I should have a cigarette. All it did was remind them that they smoked and to pull over at the next gas station and re-up on their cigarettes. That's all it did. So you can pretend to be helpful while fundamentally understanding that people are stupid, right?
And,
like, you know.
And the only way smoking rates declined is because of people just, I'm realizing and saying, oh, this is a bad, I mean, I don't know. I hear you and I agree with you, Barrett, but the massive propaganda did work. It's just not that you throw up a billboard and people start smoking. You throw up billboards and warnings for 20 years. And after 20 years, people go, oh, and smoking goes down a percentage.
Well,
it's turning the Titanic.
You throw up billboards, you make it really uncomfortable for commercials.
You legislate it.
Right, that don't need to sell cigarettes to have somebody smoking a cigarette. You make it day class A for movie actors to be smoking cigarettes and looking cool. Like the whole idea of there's I want to say it's Dexter Gordon. There's a Dexter Gordon poster called Dexter Blows Hot and Cold or something. And it's Dexter Gordon standing there with a saxophone and a cigarette. and the smoke coming up, and it's just the coolest fucking picture you've ever seen. It's like the epitome of cool. There's another one where Miles Davis is smoking a cigarette. You're like, God damn, he's just the coolest motherfucker ever, you know? And
Martin fucking Riggs, my
right?
hero.
Right,
Martin
exactly,
goddamn
right. I
Riggs.
mean, James Dean with the cigarette pack rolled up in his sleeve and shit. It's like the iconography of cigarettes being cool was a real thing. But when they stopped making it cool, but you're right, it was a they carpet bombed. You know what I mean? They hit every area and said, none of you are going to talk about cigarettes being cool. And over the course of 20 years, cigarettes stopped being cool.
They
Do you know what I
carpet
mean?
bombed, and it still took 20 years because we are a
Yeah, it
dumb,
still takes
stubborn,
time. Yeah,
mule,
I mean,
fucking
shit,
thick-headed
dude.
nation.
Dude, I have, it's funny because like I remember going into clubs and then the next day getting home and like getting, well, I would get home the next day, but like the next day I'd wake up and I'd unzip my bass case and smoke would come out of it. Like it would smell like smoke and
Yeah.
it'd be all in my hair. And then I remember when they made it like you can't smoke in bars except in Atlantic City and Vegas, right? You can't smoke there. And I remember that. And I remember like being able to leave there and not having to scrub my hair
Oh,
and have it be all in my clothes and stuff.
such beautiful
I can
legislation.
I
I remember
remember
getting in a
that.
shower and you could smell
Right.
it leaving your pores. Just
Yeah.
the whole
It's
shower would
Yeah.
gross.
smell wet
Yeah.
cigarette
Yeah. You
after a
had to
show.
shower after a gig at 3 in the morning. You'd be dead tired and showering just so that you didn't wake up with lung cancer. Yeah.
I did a gig. I have a video on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's called Good God, Do I Love Smokers. I was in South Bend, Indiana, and they set off the fire alarms in the comedy club because there was so much smoke. They were smoking so many cigarettes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fire alarm went off and we had to evacuate the club, not because, fear, but just like legislation meant we had. And the only reason I put the clip up, and I wish I had said it faster, is the PA comes on and goes, Nathan, I'm sorry, but the fire department is called. We do have to evacuate. And I went, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we have exits on this side. People are getting up, leaving. Someone said something. I said, I will be selling CDs after my set. I'll be selling them in the parking lot, something like that. Like I got in that fucking commercial right there.
Very good.
But yeah,
that's funny.
I was happy that I was recording it. It's the only time that's ever happened. Fucking smokers set off the fire alarms in a business.
I would like to think if I was on the Titanic, I would still be asking people to contribute to my Patreon account.
We don't have one of those. We just put it out there for free.
Sure. Yes,
that's because we whore different product. Yeah, I have a book out. Anyway.
Well, I wonder if we're talking about because really it seems like what we're talking about is censorship, right? Like to a degree, right? Where is
gotten away from personal responsibility? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing, right? In this particular case, right? Like, is it Joe?
I think if you're personal, I don't know, personal responsibility. I'm regulating myself, right?
But I mean, like,
if you're adulting, adult should adult.
But I mean, is it Joe Rogan's job to monitor himself, or is it the job of the government or the FCC or whoever to legislate his ability to do that?
Here's the cognitive dissonance, because I believe Joe Rogan sees himself as a good person, and he's making an honest effort. And once again, having face-to-face conversations with someone like him it's so important, because then you get to bring up, well, you say you want to be this person, but this is how you're acting. How do you square that circle? How does that work?
He does that though. That's what I said. He'll have guests on from every point of view to challenge him.
Yes, but when it comes out of his mouth, he does not think, wow, is this really something that's true? Or am I just blowing smoke out my ass? Did I really think that much about saying people who are young shouldn't have the vaccine?
Well, when he says young, what does he mean?
Like healthy
20s.
Healthy
in their 20s if they're athletic.
Am I really being responsible for the amount of young dudes who are watching my podcast, listening to me and watching me, and what kind of influence I have on them? I think having a discussion with him is one thing, once again, but then on the other hand, you have, once again, the Tucker Carlsons, the Sean Hannitys, who are obviously grifters, who are just saying things.
Tucker Carlson, who was trending because he got vaccinated and then goes on his show and goes, what's really in the vaccine? Should you be getting? It's like, you know, that is I think Rogan is at least honest, because if he says something stupid, it's because he said it, not because he was trying to be manipulative. Whereas Tucker and Hannity are absolutely trying to be manipulative.
Yeah, they're con men. That's what they are. They're con men.
Yeah. This is fascinating because, like, I feel like there's a line, right, where personal responsibility, like, there's a place at which the government should take over, right? The question is, where is that place, right? Mm-hmm. Like, where, like, when it comes to institutional things, the government needs to legislate the changing of that, because those are broad sweeping changes, right? If you're talking about the way people think in this country, if you think the way people think in this country is wrong, that's going to take a massive shift in the way we learn history, what we learn in history, the kind of books we read in school, the kind of things that get put on television, and all that stuff is based on other stuff, right? Like, but if you got a bunch of kids reading really intelligent books right now in first grade, well, if you could do that nationwide, let's say theoretically, then by the time those kids are 22, 24, out of school, got their degrees, and they're maybe got a master's in something, and go into making films, they're going to be making films based on the kind of stuff, the kind of thinking that they have been trained to have, right? Mm-hmm. So you could have a cultural shift by just changing the educational system, right? But when it comes to personal accountability, like, where do you draw the line between what is a systemic, something that needs a systemic overhaul, and some asshole that just needs to watch his mouth? Like, there's a lot of area in between those two things.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And where do you actually draw the line that goes from personal accountability into someone needs to make a law about this?
Where's the news or social media or podcasting version of you can't yell fire in a crowded theater?
Right, exactly. Right. Like, the right, you can't, right, like, that makes perfect sense. But, like, what do you do, right? Like, social media is kind of like the Wild West.
It's interesting because part of this is going to be in the courts, right? Because we've seen Mike Lindell, for example, the My Pillow guy, getting sued. You see a lot of people on Fox getting sued for the crap that they talked about the election being stolen and all the mistruths from that.
Well, those are very specific lawsuits, though, because those were very specific lies, and so
it creates precedent. That's what it does.
Well, and Newsmax already settled.
Yep.
So that's one down. And you're right. It will be interesting because I can't put it in any other way. Those are very specific lies. And a private entity said, nope, fuck you, not going to stand for this.
Right.
Whereas who is going to sue Tucker Carlson for his vaccination bullshit? The CDC? Are Doctors Without Borders going to say, you asked what's in the vaccine, knowing full well, the information's out there? The Dominion lawsuits are fantastic.
Oh, they are.
They're challenging the lies.
That's biscuits and gravy, my friends. That's biscuits and gravy. That's what that is.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, you brought up chemtrails and silly things like that, but, like, when you ask Black people why they believe in shit like chemtrails, it's because of the Tuskegee experiments. And why do they believe in these things? It's because, well, there's a historical precedent for the government lying to people going to court, losing in court, and then 20 years later coming out that it was all rigged, right? Like this, the system has not proven itself to be trustworthy. It's funny to me that now we have white middle class and under white folks who believe the same things that Black folks believe, and argue it with the same kind of veracity, the same kind of shit that they would have called a conspiracy theory.
Good goddamn point.
In the 1960s, they've become in that same way. But like to me, like, there, when you have COINTELPRO and you have all these things, like, people have a reason to mistrust the government. At the end of the day, that's the problem, is that you have a reason to mistrust the government and the courts and the police and this, because there's tons of historical precedent for it. So it's not completely outrageous to believe these things, even whether I believe them or not. I understand why people believe them.
Good goddamn point. I love that you just said that. Thank you.
When I talk to someone like a flat earther, or the people, folks are out there, and one of the first things to come out of my mouth is that there have been real conspiracies, and I'll just list off a couple of them. So, what really is the question? Knowing that there are real conspiracies, that there have been, historically speaking, real conspiracies, how do we know what we know? And then there's a conversation about how do we know the world is round? Because you can just do that with shadows and a clock, to tell you the truth, given enough distance.
That's funny. You made me think of, I can't remember where I saw this. This is not an original thought. It's something I saw, but the way to deal with conspiracy theorists is to out-conspiracy them. So someone says, oh, I think the moon landing was faked. And you say, you believe the moon is real?
Right. That's a reductio ad absurdum argument right there.
Yes. Well, let's start winding things down. Don't know if we've solved anything, learned anything, or just created more headaches for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, you go first. Promote the hell out of yourself, please. Or if you have any parting thoughts, give those, and then promote the hell out of yourself. The Patreon you mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just say this I'll start off with about personal responsibility. I think being a father has informed me, informed my behavior about how to, about motivating me to be more responsible, right? I think that's pretty trite, but it does come with the territory. And also just being...
I said I'd let you speak. I have to interrupt. I don't think it's trite at all. I do not think it's trite in the slightest, because this is so stupidly obvious, but becoming a dad changed almost fucking everything about me. I still retained my core of evil, but it fights to survive now.
Good.
But
well, I mean, I think it changes because you realize that people do what you do, not what you say.
Yeah.
So you can yell and scream and beat the shit out of your kids on a regular basis to tell them to do this thing, but whatever you do is what they're going to do.
Huh?
There's no amount of wire hanger beatings that are going to make them actually do anything other than what you do.
Yeah.
So that's
you like if you want responsibility, or
if you want your kids to if you want them to turn out half decent, you have to be the model. Yeah. There's just no other way. You know what I mean? It's just how it is.
And I try to take that kind of sensibility when I'm on social media.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the responsible thing to do. All right. Yeah. So that being said, I'm just going to shill my YouTube channel, Laughing in Disbelief. I run a YouTube channel called Laughing in Disbelief. I do the Disappointed Cat morning show. It's all about progressive politics and atheism and the news cycle, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. approximately. And then Eastern, thank you. And then I do an open room where anyone can come in and we could just have an open conversation from 10 to 11.
And you didn't want to plug that Patreon? I'm giving you several openings here.
Oh, Nathan, I have so many things to plug, my friend.
Buy you a coffee.
Yeah, exactly. You can also find my satirical blog, Laughing in Disbelief, on the Pathos non-religious channel. Today's piece was called the Bifle. It's the Bible-based. It's the rifle and a Bible combined together. So it's like an evangelical rifle for Christians. So that's an example of what I do on my blog. I make fun of the would-be theocrats in this country, and that's Laughing in Disbelief, the blog. You can find me on Twitter. I'm everywhere, basically creating chaos. But please check out my Laughing in Disbelief YouTube channel, and please subscribe. And of course, I have Andrew Hall on Patreon. You can check me out there too.
There it is.
I do content just for patrons, and I do some content on my YouTube channel too, just for members and everything. So I've been doing this kind of gig for, I don't know, how long have we known each other, Nathan? Way too long, I know.
Not as long as Barrett and I have known each other, because we were
zygotes
true, together.
I think we might be closing well over 5 years at this point.
That easily.
Yeah.
Well,
all right. Speaking of Barrett, let's jump to him. I'm going to start talking here because anybody that does watch us regularly knows that we've been away for a little while. You also know that before we went away, Barrett was saying, going into the studio soon, making that new album. Well, guess what? I got to hear it because I'm friends with him. He sent me the album. They went into the studio, banged it out, and Jesus, good goddamn Christ, it is fantastic. And because I know Barrett, he would send me demos. And with a demo, it's I don't want to say poorly produced, but it's an unfinished product. You can hear the potential. And now I got to hear the potential realized. And off camera, we would have these conversations about how exciting it is to be around professionals, studio musicians that know their shit, and a producer that knows how to get a certain sound. And he was telling me all this as he was working and right after, before sending me the album. And then I got to hear everything he was saying, which is holy shit. Like I sent him an email, like the subtlety of the organ on that track, or the little bass lick after the guitar solo, just a trill, but the way do you have a title for the album yet? Or are you still working on that? Do you have
still working on it. We don't know.
Do you have a timeline for release?
Late summer, early fall.
But and would you even call what you sent me finished, or is that like 90% finished? Because
that's first. We're gonna get another round of mixes. I think it actually came today while we were talking. So I have another round of mixes to listen to. Then it has to be mastered.
Don't change it too much, because everything, unless somehow it's going to sound better. Because as I said, there were, I'm going to call them atmospheres, because when you listen to music, you can hear, like I said, the subtlety of the organ. You can hear something back here as you're hearing the singing here, and the drum beat. Like a good mix gives you this. I don't want to say Phil Spector's wall of sound, because that just sounds like something coming at you. But whatever I was listening to, it was textured. It was layered. It didn't feel overbearing. I enjoyed the shit out of it. And the more I think about it, and having listened to it a second time, I told you, spoiler alert, maybe I shouldn't say this, but the song Bury You, track 4, as you sent it to me, that should be the lead single. I said I was going back and forth on it, but so look for Bury You, or Bury Yourself.
Bury You.
It moves along. So,
well, I mean,
I'm plugging Barrett for Barrett, because I was so excited to get the album in advance. Fuck all you peasants watching.
That's right. Ben Rice over at DeGraw Sound, he's a genius. He's a great writer. He's a great artist in his own right. And he's a fantastic producer and a fantastic engineer and a really cool person.
And the reason we weren't recording is you were in there 12-hour days, correct?
Yeah, 10 to 12-hour days. We were in there it was long days. But it's kind of like long days like when you were a kid, and you'd leave the house in the morning with your friends and not come home till dinner time. You know what I mean? And it was a long day, but you didn't really think about it. You know what I mean? It was just like you're hanging out with your friends.
You weren't looking at the clock like you were in school.
Yeah, and it was just they were just really good days. Like the band was good, the crew, like everybody was just great. It was a phenomenal experience, and I agree that I think the music went from a really cool idea to proof of concept. Like, holy shit, we were right. Like when we really do this the way it can be done, it is as good as we thought it was going to be. Do you know what I mean?
Right? Absolutely agree.
Which is that's like a fascinating thing to be smacked in the face with being right about something that you're really kind of like, I think it's good, but I'm attached to it emotionally, so I'm not necessarily objective. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I can be objective, and so it's really good to be able to get something back that I can be like, okay, like I can see that we were right, I think, at least so far.
Well, let me interrupt you again, because anybody that has no clue what we're talking about, that would be the Katie Henry Band.
Yes.
So katiehenryband.com. I will throw that up now.
Actually,
antargoodwin.com. Actually,
Katie
Henry Music.
KatieHenryMusic.com.
Sorry,
Yes.
I
But
fucked
our
that up.
buddy Josh
In West
Cannon,
Virginia?
yes, he lives in West Virginia. And we're doing the 4848 festival September 4 and 5, 4, 5, 6,
In
3,
West
4,
Virginia?
5 in West Virginia. And Josh, if you're watching this, I'm gonna hit you up in a bit because we're gonna need to put together a band, and I'm gonna probably need you to find us a drummer and then play some guitar,
All
some
right.
gitbox. So if he's watching this, expect a phone call at some point.
Oh, I should get him on here before you get a chance to talk to him to surprise you.
Yeah,
Memories.
that'd be fun.
All right.
Is Roy still out there?
Yeah, but he's a recluse. He still uses the name Ray Conrad on Facebook, which is the name I gave him. His name is Roy Carr, but when we got to college and he was my roommate, I just called him Ray Conrad for no reason, and now he uses it on Facebook because paranoid government, nobody find him tracking.
Buried in the swamp with like a trapdoor spider with a gun, waiting for people. Yeah, I wonder what he's up to sometimes.
All right, my turn to brag. While you were gone, Barrett, I posted this on Facebook. I got the best compliment. You talk about realization of ideas, like I wrote this book and I hope people like it. My friend Catherine, my friend Kat, she referred it to a friend, and the friend texted her back, and my friend texted me a screenshot of the text, which was that this friend sat down to read the book and 4 hours later finished it. Wow. Just got sucked right into it, and instead of reading a chapter here or there, read my book in 1 4-hour sitting. And I mean, just she said she'd not felt that connected to a book in forever, and that kind of scared me. Like, shit, I hope when I post this it doesn't build people's expectations too high, because I like it, but not everybody's going to sit and read it in one setting. But the book is We Are 100. It is on Amazon, and people are digging it. Oh, here, this I'll pop my ego right now with 2 stories really quick. I thought this was funny. I've been promoting the shit out of the book. I was in a local newspaper several weeks ago, and I just got put in the Sunday edition of the big paper in town. Several weeks ago, one of my elderly buddies at the gym, just an elderly man that we just sort of acknowledge each other, walked by me and said, I think I saw you in the paper the other day. Read something about a book. And I said, yeah, I did. Did it work? Did you buy it? And he went, nah. And then the same thing happened today at the post office. I went in, and my postal clerk there that I've known for years, I don't know her name, but you just get known by sight, and I'm wearing a mask. I've got the mask on. She goes, you were in the paper yesterday. You were in the Sunday paper. You wrote a book, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. She goes, good for you. Like, not that I bought it. So some people are reading my book in 4 hours, and others are, I know that guy. Not going to buy his shit, though.
That's right. I know a famous author. Is his books any good? I don't know.
So that's nathantimmel.com. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. What an awkward ending, but if we don't pull it here, we'll keep going.
We will.
All right.
All right.